Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Record. Today I have the honor to have an exclusive interview with JC Miller from Los Angeles. JC, welcome to Record. How did your journey into music and production begin?
My very first memory is of my dad and his friend playing bongos when I lived in Michigan and Detroit, and they were smoking cigarettes and playing bongos, and that's kind of my earliest memory of rhythm. And then when I was like 12, one of my dad's students from North Carolina played The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down on our terrible piano that was all out of tune, but I just could tell immediately that that was my calling. So I kind of then got into Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple and, all kinds of kind of metal type stuff, UFO and things like that, some which holds up, some which doesn't. But basically, I started into the music production, like in advertising and film by, I'm of the age, like when that stuff was going on when I was a kid. When they were using rock, it didn't sound like rock. When they played jazz, it didn't sound like jazz. So I was really into authenticity of different kinds of music, and that's how I got into music production. But then later, I realized I don't want to really do it for hire. I kind of want to have the music done when I say it's done. So that's what the JC project is about. Just, me being me without someone else telling me what's going on.
What are your earliest musical influences?
I love all kinds of music, and I'm kind of like a sponge. So, I loved my dad's classical music, Howard Hanson and Aaron Copland and Samuel Barber, orchestral music. But, like I say, I grew up mostly in the Bay Area, and there was just a great music scene there. So, I got really into writing songs and loved, Neil Young and Leon Russell, and then got really into playing guitar and got really into Jimmy Page and Jeff Beck. And, then I kind of started bringing it all together. And I definitely have a Southern inflection when I'm doing, my thing. My biggest influences, still today are like, Tom Petty and Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker Band, Little Feat, Daniel Lanois, just real earthy, real music that's got the soul and spirit.
Your style blends modern and classical elements. How did you develop your signature sound?
Well, doing music for hire and being a composer for hire, doing production, I end up doing a lot of different stuff. And, I always think of myself as a practitioner and not an innovator, like an innovator like Miles Davis or, Eddie Van Halen, that's real innovation with the tools, with the instrument. I feel like I'm more part of like the oral tradition and the practitioner where, to me, if the band kind of recorded a little more or Leon Russell was still around, or there's a Dr. John song I never heard, I try to have that sense of classicism in it, or let's say I gravitate towards that. Basically, things kind of start and end with the groove. Even as much as I love playing guitar, it's kind of like the rhythm of the lead guitar that's pretty interesting. If you watch Stevie Ray Vaughan's, right hand, it looks like he's, playing a Blue-Eyed Soul, funk part, and it happens to be, lead notes. So it kind of starts and ends with the rhythm. I like the whole landscape. I play guitar, bass, keyboards. Started on the drums. My parents said it was too loud, so that's when I got a guitar. I was 14.
What inspires you the most when you start a new track?
To really get it going for me, it's like, Spike Lee calls it a jam, like it's a world, it's a place, and that kind of, like I was saying, starts and ends with rhythm. So like if I feel like a rhythm is like stilted or like why do that, it sounds really kind of too white bread or something. I like blending that kind of southern second line funk and R&B with like country and rock and metal. So I try to have a kind of a foot in both worlds, and I feel comfortable. I'm looking for that comfort factor or groove. It's like, oh yeah, I could listen to this for like 6 minutes, which I'm about to do. And if the rhythm is kind of not there yet, then we take a break and get it going. But I think once the kind of cyclical jam groove of it all is set up, then I can kind of do anything. And with harmony and chords and stuff, it's the same thing. I'm really interested in like the circular, amen 4/1 rather than 5/1. I like the more kind of melancholy that conveys. So I have some kind of like things that I do, with harmony, which is really important, and voicings, and then of course the band, which is me and Marty Rifkin, who's the producer and just an amazing multi-instrumentalist, and so we kind of play off of each other.
How do you translate emotions or energy into your music?
So, basically emotion and energy in my music was kind of thrust upon me when I was the composer for hire, because I remember people, directors always saying, faster, 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 and they don't mean faster, they mean something else. And same with emotion. If it's overly, manipulative and cloying or melodramatic, it's not for me. If it's like too fast, I like slow, fat grooves and, the emotion coming through in like creaky ways that are both rough and smooth. I love Al Green, I love Sade, I love Seal, I love, Blackmore's Rainbow, and, I have pretty eclectic tastes. Chet Baker, I just have a lot of influences, but getting the emotion and the energy into it kind of just evolves from playing on the track. I probably don't have too many tracks that are overly emotional or overly energetic, probably by design.
Can you share a bit about your favorite songs or your recent projects? What is the story behind it?
Interesting. That's a good question too. Let's see. We recently did a song called Wrangler's Lament, where what was different about it, well, there's a few things. It was in 3/4 time, really kind of a, people would say, oh, I like your blues waltz, because of the 3/4 time. It was sort of a waltz, but lyrically, that song came about because I had two ideas that I wanted to, meld into one. And usually I have a single idea about a certain place or, a certain event in history. In this case, I was playing with like wranglers, like trying to corral animals, including yourself, and the kind of Western, universal theme of that. But then also I was thinking about everything's a gamble, and, the roulette and the cards you're dealt and, your fate, it has got a lot of like gambling metaphors. So in this case, I made like a Reese's buttercup of chocolate and peanut butter pudding, the kind of Wrangler imagery in with the gambling imagery, and it worked. So that was an interesting story behind it, because usually I don't do that, try to keep it really simple and clear, but that one did merge in a way that I liked and thought was fun.
How do you see the future in the music industry with the new technology and the AI tools?
Next question. I hope we have a lot of time. I'd like to talk about that. No, just kidding. I'd like to not talk about that, because that basically, my whole way I define myself would be against that completely, because I like wood, strings, hands, metal, sweat, grease, the Rolling Stones, Neil Young, U2. It's an alchemy among interesting musicians that are listening to each other. And so everything created by AI just doesn't have that like authenticity. Even if it knows how to capture a certain, blues turn, it doesn't really have taste. And it's not convincing in any way to me yet. And essentially I have, a pretty strong disinterest in it. I've always been a real tech knucklehead and kind of embraced that somewhere along the way to keep the, visionary part of it active, and just saying I got to get other people to do that because I keep losing my files and, dumb stuff like that. And like, oh, now I know how to, use this plugin, but I'm not inspired anymore and I forget what I was playing, so I'm going to eat a sandwich. So for me, it's not immediate enough in the human way. I'm after capturing like the humanity in real players. And that's what's so amazing about being able to do this with Marty Rifkin is just, when I first came to him and I was like, hey, I'm going to play this. What are you going to play? He said, I have no idea. Let's record it and I'll react to you and we'll listen to each other. The best bands know exactly where to drop in and out. And that sense of arrangement and that taste, I don't see it coming from Silicon Valley or anywhere else like that. It's made up. I'm into authenticity in music and in all things, basically.
Collaborations are a big part in the music world. Is there an artist you would love to work with?
Oh, there's a bunch. Right off the bat, that's a good question too. I would have to probably start with Bonnie Raitt because she just melts me and always has, and like is so languid. Her slide playing and her singing, it's just exactly where I'm at. I'd love to play with Joni Mitchell, check out some open tunings. Jimmy Page was asked who his favorite guitar player was, and he answered Joni Mitchell, and I was a kid and I thought, God, that's a weird answer, But of course he's going to be getting, those great open tunings he composed all that amazing music with from that kind of Joni Mitchell idea. But, also, Vince Gill, what an amazing guitar player and singer. I mean, it's just kind of endless, I like to connect with James House, who I was in a band with called the Mustangs in like 1984 or 5. That was really good, and we kind of lost track. So celebrities and non-celebrities, all kinds of collabs are cool. I love, Ry Cooder, really getting down deep into the Cuban thing, or Peter Gabriel really getting, past the surface on like African rhythms and stuff he did with Real World Records. So it's kind of an endless list, but for now, let's say Bonnie Raitt, Joni Mitchell, Vince Gill, and James House.
What challenge have you faced as an indie artist, and how did you overcome them?
Well, that's interesting because, at first I was like a songwriter, like, singing, basically kind of song demos, and then I never really ran into a lead singer. So in self-defense, I kind of singing more myself and making the sound of the voice kind of more fit into what the attitude of the track is. So transitioning from like writer for other artists to being an artist myself. Once I kind of broke through with that and just said, hey, that's what the sound is. The trouble is that it's all kind of like, rigged by algorithms. And at this point, so much of it just can't be, a paying gig. And I see a lot in the indie scene, a lot of, complaints about that, and it's totally valid, but it's the way that it is. And, I make music because I can't not make music. And I also catch myself in kind of like a stoic philosophy way of like when, I do want, when I find myself wanting like more clicks or, get into that rat race, we know where that ends up, seeing that all over the place. It feels insincere and it feels jive, and it's like, man, come on, there's lots of, unknown musicians that carried on the oral tradition, and, that stuff can send me. It doesn't have to be famous, doesn't have to be, a celebrity. So the problem is really letting go of all that, letting go of expectations of a business, of a career, of something steady, and just going, I don't know, it's kind of like, cooking or gardening or something that, I just got to do it. And that makes it easier in some ways too.
What message or feeling do you hope your listener will take away from your walk?
I hope the listeners can sense how much fun it is, working with Marty Rifkin, in the studio, working with my wife, Gabby, who's the executive producer, Ryan Corey, who does the videos. Hopefully people come away with an authenticity that we're chasing and, a simplicity. I think of myself as a Western writer. I love Cormac McCarthy and Ernest Hemingway. So I don't need to ever have someone, say like, wow, I've never heard anything that sounds like that, remotely like this. This is, B-52s or Kraftwerk or something. Again, it's not really innovation on that level. It's more like extension. So I hope it feels really good, like a catcher's mitt or an old pair of Levi's, that it feels vintage on arrival, a little bit craggy, rough and smooth, but really just authentic human music and not, EDM 4 on the floor, computer generated stuff. So, the humanity of it, the frailty of it, the energy of it, the emotion of it. That's what I wish, they would take away.
Thank you so much, JC, for this exclusive interview, and I wish you a nice weekend.
Thank you.